So it seems that we've got the rules revealed for Aethon Shaan, Chapter Master of the Vanguard, and it looks like this shadowy loyalist chapter also has a boosted version of the Vanguard Task Force detachment to go alongside. Let's talk about what this guy can do in game, and the powerful new army for the Stealth Space Marines, with a few more boosted reserve shenanigans. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the recently unveiled rules for Aethon Shaan, the new Chapter Master of the Vanguard, and really quite a fun model. This is the week that his model releases, so as a result we've both got rules and more lore for him, detailing just a little bit more about his succession from Aethon Shaan. Basically this guy's the new Chapter Master of the Vanguard, and as we'd heard already, Shrike seems to be going back to be Shadow Captain and the leader of the First Company, focusing on his role as a Master of Stealth Assaults. After leading his chapter through a period of turmoil around the opening of the Great Rift, it seems that Shrike is stepping down, basically feeling like he doesn't live up to the well-rounded teachings of his Primarch, and has a little too much battle lust and recklessness that really befits High Command. As a result, he kept a good eye on Aethon Shaan's progress, initially the leader of the 10th Company, then the 4th, and then Shadow Captain of the Vanguard's veteran first. I was particularly impressed by his contemporaries' command at a number of key battles, routing Genestealer cults, Iron Warriors, and Orcs in turn, all of which with a masterful campaign and surprisingly little cost to his resources and the chapter. Aethon Shaan isn't a completely new character. His backstory has been explored a bit alongside the Ultramarines in the chapters due. That pitted him and Uriel Ventress against Chaos. Now he's ascended to command of the chapter. He fights with the relic jump pack, the Blackwing Mantle, the Claws of Severax handed down from the slain Vanguard previous chapter master, and is more often seen commanding his chapter from the shadows as opposed to leading from the front, often only joining his battle brothers for the final strike, and until then instructing them over the Vox, his small avian servo skulls acting as his eyes and ears. His miniature has been a particularly well received one out of the new Space Marines, really quite a fun model for the Vanguard, perched on a great gnarled tree stump, draped in some tassels with some mysterious runic script of deliverance, the small avian servo skull swooping about in his wake. His claws are pretty fun with some big curved talons there. It's got a black feathered cape, all very appropriate for the Vanguard, and has a choice of different head swaps too. Overall, he seems to have been one of the better received miniatures from Games Workshop in quite some time, and seems it's going to cost around £28, $45 or €35. If you are looking to pick up the miniature at the weekend, then check out the channel's affiliate discount retailers. They'll be linked down in the video description. There's a bunch of different ones around the world. Element Games for 15% off in the UK, Gap Games for 21% in Australia, Fenris Workshop for 10 in Canada, Wargame Portal for 15 in the USA, and Tash and Geldeep for somewhere around 16 to 20 in Germany and the EU. Here are the times where their pre-orders are going live. Aethon Shaan alongside the new Vanguard Combat Patrol box set. They'll be going up for sale on Friday nights to Saturday morning. A big thank you to anyone using those. It does help to support Auspex Tactics and the videos I make. Lore and fun new miniature aside, let's talk about his datasheet. Aethon Shaan's a Vanguard epic hero, and perhaps counter to what I was expecting, it turns out that he doesn't lead units and acts as a lone operative. He doesn't have the option to attach to jump intercessors or Vanguard veterans, I guess with the idea of him commanding from afar. Interestingly, it looks like if you have both him and Shrike in the same army, you're not allowed to have two jump pack lone operatives on the go at the same time for some reason. Shrike has the option either to be a lone operative or join a unit, and basically if both of them are present in the same army, Shrike's going to be acting as an attached leader unit as he loses lone operative, so it's going to make sense to attach him to either jump intercessors or some Vanguard veterans. To be honest, I feel like that was probably the best way to use him anyway. He'll still give the whole squad his special rule to stop them getting shot outside of 12 inches. That's not affected by him losing lone operative, and that's probably the way that I would have been tempted to use him anyway. Really powerful to have such a big scary unit that you can't shoot at long range. To stop there being two chapter masters in the army as well. If you have both of them in the same army, then Aethon Shaan loses the chapter master keyword and gains captain in its place. Getting into Aethon Shaan's abilities themselves though, it seems that Blackwing Mantle jump pack gives him a boosted movement stat. He moves 14 inches rather than the normal 12 for a Astartes jump infantry, so he's a bit faster than Shrike. Really quite powerful to have such a fast moving lone operative, so basically you can't shoot him greater than 12 inches away, and that means that if you have him just launching around areas of the board he's going to be hard to deal with. He could screen out parts of your deployment zone potentially. He could be a good single model that's very fast to jump around doing actions. And then with that big movement stat, he's likely to get the jump on enemy units rather than the other way around when he wants to. Otherwise, beyond that, for his defensive profile, he's a fairly standard Space Marine captain. 5 wounds at toughness 4 with a 3+ save and a 4+ invulnerable save. And like many lone operatives, he also has the stealth keyword for a -1 to hit if you do manage to get within that 12 inches. Keywords wise, he doesn't really have anything that's too unexpected. If it's an infantry character with Epic Hero, Fly, a jump pack, and the Tacticus keyword, I guess he's in Tacticus where Strike is in Phobos. He doesn't have the grenades keyword, I guess a bit hard to throw those when he's in those big talons. And finally he does have the option to Deep Strike, which plays in with his Blackwing Mantle special rule as he can free rapid ingress. It does feel like that's a bit of a trade-off though, given that he's got really good movement when he's on the board. There's a pretty reasonable chance that he could reach more interesting positions when he's not screened out to 9 inches potentially. For his damage output, it's really not so very different to Aethon Shrike's profile. He's got 7 attacks, hitting on a 2+, at strength 5, AP -2 and damage 2. As they're lightning claws, he gets twin linked, so he gets 2 reroll wound rolls. That keeps him a bit more relevant against tough stuff. The main difference between his and Shrike's attack profiles is that Shrike has precision inbuilt, so he can potentially go in and assassinate enemy leaders without needing to spend a command point on epic challenge, whereas instead Aethon Shaan has sustained hits too, so that basically will just give him more all-around might, 2 extra hits for every 6 that you roll, so he is likely to deal more damage overall than Shrike is. For a typical damage output with those lightning claws, he'll slay around about 7 termagants. With that profile, he's likely best against more standard Space Marines though, killing around about 5 intercessors in a single round of melee. Maybe not quite so hot against Terminators, around 1 or 2 slain on average due to the damage 2 not going well into their defensive profile. About 6 wounds to a toughness 9 or less vehicle like a Rhino, but only around 2 or so to a Lamb Raider. It's just not going to be all that effective against anything that's toughness 10 or higher. I guess potentially like any other Space Marine unit, he could get some good value out of Oath of Moment. Getting a +1 to wound would make him a lot more of a threat against tough monsters and vehicles. Plus he could potentially reroll everything that isn't a 6 with the Claws of Severax, as he'd wind up with very slightly more hits on average that way. On top of that he has a heavy bolt pistol as well, so a tiny bit of range shooting, not quite as punchy as Shrike's Blackout pistol though. Then finally we've got his special rules. The Blackwing Mantle gives him both free rapid ingress and free heroic intervention. It looks like you could use both of those within 1 turn if it made sense to, so I guess potentially you could have him drop down to bolster a friendly unit that was just about to get charged and then jump into melee with the thing that charged them to hopefully cut down quite a lot of them. For heroic intervention though, you'd have to be going into something that's not just going to kill him outright, as he will be fighting second there, and while his defensive profile isn't nothing, it's not particularly standout as characters go. Just having free rapid ingress is really quite a big deal though. If you put him into Deep Strike Reserve, then he's going to be dropping down at the end of the enemy movement phase, completely safe as he'll be greater than 12 inches away from them, and that means that he'll basically get an automatic charge on something outlying in the enemy army, and with 14 inches you might be able to have a bit more choice over your targets that aren't right on the front line as well. It definitely feels like a solid option for him, but maybe not the only one with quite that good a movement characteristic, and good utility things from having lone operatives on the board earlier on as well. Otherwise, for his special rules, he's got the Master of Shadows. This one's his sort of command ability, allowing you to mark one enemy unit, and then everything in your army that Space Marines can reroll charges against that unit army-wide. You declare it in the command phase. It doesn't sound like he actually needs to be on the board, so he could potentially do that while he's waiting to turn up. It looks like the rule comes with a downside though. If I'm reading it right, then it basically means that if you're within 12 inches of the enemy unit that you've nominated, and he can declare a charge against them, then it sounds like you have to. So occasionally it might not make sense to make use of that if there's multiple charge targets and you might have Space Marine units wanting to go into other things nearby. For any one unit charging in isolation though, it's all win. It could just be helpful to coordinate him getting to his target a bit more reliably, but I guess you could just look at the board when you're about to make charges and choose the one where you think a reroll is going to have the most impact, maybe a sort of medium-long charge that's got the potential to fail if you're unlucky. Overall, he certainly seems like an interesting character at first impressions. Fast-moving lone operatives tend to be pretty good in 40k. Free rapid ingress is certainly a very interesting way to get him to the fight. He seems to have a pretty reasonable amount of damage that should be able to bully lighter squads or maybe jump on characters. And his army command rule at least seems like it would reliably add some value. Over the course of the game it might equate to another charge or two being successful, and that's quite a big deal when it happens. The last thing that we're waiting for at the moment is his points cost, given that he doesn't have one printed on his datasheet and he isn't in the Minotaur and Field manual yet. I guess it'd probably be somewhere around the sort of 100 points or so that Aethon Shrike is at the moment. If so, then I feel like he'd be a pretty interesting option. Perhaps the place where it looks like he's going to have even more excessive value though is the new detachment for the Raven Guard, and that's the Shadowmark Talon. As we saw with the Salamander's equivalent of this one, it looks like it's a version of a Core Codex Space Marine detachment, but with just a few rules tweaks. As with that one, it looks like there's a benefit for including this character in them. Some of the stratagems are changed or replaced. There's one of the enhancements that's swapped out, though overall it does look like it's probably superior to the Space Marine Vanguard. It is locked to the Raven Guard though. There's a restriction section that says you can only take Raven Guard character models, so you can't go stealing this version for the Ultramarines and they still play with the version in the Codex. In any case though, the core rule for the detachment is unchanged, -1 to hit and the benefit of cover against ranged attacks from greater than 12 inches away. The impact of that will vary depending on how much shooting the opponent has, but it's really not a bad set of abilities. In gunfights it's going to make a big difference. Alongside the core rule though, you get a new rule for Aethon Shaan, and while he's on the board you're allowed to use the Into Darkness stratagem for 0 CP. That really is a pretty enormous advantage, given that's one of the best stratagems of the detachment, basically allowing you to pick up units and put them back in reserve, maybe to warp shooting Space Marines or utility units around the map repeatedly, so not having any command point burden for doing that is a really big deal. I guess that's a solid incentive for just keeping him on the board all game long, as opposed to setting him up to use rapid ingress, as then you wouldn't be able to use this for free in the first turn or so. Then for the enhancements for the detachment, the majority are unchanged but just renamed. There's still one to allow an infantry models unit to gain infiltrate, which can be interesting enough with some scary Space Marine damage dealers. There's still the Lord of Deceit one that gives you an extra command point for enemy stratagems happening within 12 inches, an Umbral Raptor for a stealth and lone operative, which I guess could give you another fast moving lone operative with a jump pack captain if you wanted to, or use it with something sturdy like a Gravis captain. The one that's new though just seems to have been lifted out of the White Scars detachment. Hunter's Instincts has the same name as that and has just been ported from the Stormlance force, and it's basically an early strategic reserve arrival, arriving onto the board as if it were one round later when your unit's set up from reserves. That one costs 25 points for the White Scars, though interestingly this version I guess is a bit better given that it's not locked to mounted models, and compared with the vast majority of similar rules in the game, this is one of the only ones that isn't locked to your movement phase, so you can potentially use it with rapid ingress. That's really quite a big deal that you could have a big scary unit rapid ingressing turn 1, all ready to get a guaranteed charge on the outskirts of the enemy army turn 2. You could use it with something outflanking on the peripheries of the army, or you could use it with some deep strikers like jump infantry or terminators. Overall that's a pretty terrifying prospect. The opponent might have first turn, and then you could drop a terminator unit with rapid ingress then, all ready to charge them straight away for near guaranteed in your own first turn. That one's replaced a move shoot move one called Execute and Redeploy that is there in the Vanguard task force. That one was usable enough, though didn't make its way into every list. Then going through the stratagems for the detachment, it looks like there's one new one and then 3 others that have basically been changed in some way. They still have Armour of Contempt here, and that's the same as it ever is. The standard AP reduction is still reduced to just 1 unit per phase, as per the generic balanced data slate errata. Laylo the Tyrant has been buffed though. Previously this was 2 command points for precision for an Astartes infantry unit in melee, now it's just 1 CP for the same. That's really quite a big deal, and that makes that significantly more usable. I felt like 2 CP was an option that occasionally could be worth it, though it had a fairly painful price tag. It's going to be a lot more of an outright strength for just 1 CP, though it's still only going to be useful against the right enemies and the right targets. For the new stratagem, there's one called Feint and Thrust. This one allows you to fall back, shoot and charge. That one can apply to any Astartes unit, including vehicles and things. It's just generally really quite a powerful one to have. Perhaps particularly useful for any infantry shooting units in here, and the detachment definitely has some interest enough for maybe things like Centurions or a big squad of Hellblasters or something maybe. Fall back and shoot could be good there, and fall back and charge could be nice if anything survives in melee. On top of that though, Furboss units and scout units can also shoot and charge in a turn in which they advance. That could be handy enough on occasion, and I guess Kayvon Shrike has the Furboss keyword, so I suppose that means that his unit could advance and charge. Could be really quite a big deal in extending their threat range there. Otherwise though, I feel like most of the time Furboss and Scout units aren't really going to be worth the investment for that. It seems that the one that this replaced was the Sabotage and Objective one, which was a nice boosted sticky objective one that had the potential to deal some damage. So it definitely does come with a trade-off. That one was at least fairly useful, even if you could get the ability from Intercessors. Then there's one called Stunning Fusillade, which is unchanged. Infantry shooting at an enemy that's greater than 12 inches away get +1 ballistic skill and +1 AP. If a model's slain by that, they test Battle Shock. That one's unchanged and pretty helpful for any infantry shooting. One of the reasons why Inceptors are particularly strong in this detachment. That could be nice for Centurions with their return to reserves options as well. Then for 1 command point, there's Raptorial Vigilance. This one again has been changed. Previously it was backing away from enemy charges, D6 inches for most Space Marine infantry or mounted units, boosted to a full 6 inches for scouts or Phobos. Now though, it's been changed to just one of the more standard reactive moves. It's triggered in the enemy movement phase when they move within 9 inches of your unit, and then most of your units can move D6 inches, and again it's a flat 6 for scouts or Phobos. That's still pretty helpful, though maybe not a direct upgrade every time. It does mean that you might have the option to be able to use it to hide from enemy shooting. You could still potentially use it to back away from enemy charges, They'd have a bit less information to work with where the other units are going to move, and I guess you wouldn't be able to use it against deep strike charges going from greater than 9 inches away. It's still really quite a powerful stratagem wherever it turns up though, even if it's a bit more of a random d6 one rather than flat 6 inches all the time. Finally, there's the Return to Reserves one called Into Darkness. This one's not really changed very much. Either 2 scouts or phobos units or 1 infantry unit can be removed from the board, put them in strategic reserves, and you can't use it for units in engagement range. I guess technically that's been slightly buffed, as previously it could be denied by enemies within 3 inches, so the opponent actually has to charge your units if they want to deny it now. I guess often that won't be the biggest deal in the world, but a small improvement to an already good stratagem, particularly one that you could be using for free a lot of the time in this detachment, seems really nice. Overall it's still going to be really powerful, still excellent for utility units with phobos jumping around the board doing secondaries, and still very nice for Inceptors being able to do repeated close deep strikes or get nice line of sights on their targets, or Centurions jumping around the board edges to get lines of sight with really powerful firepower. All very good stuff if you can do it for free, and those units have a bit more freedom now there's a fallback shoot and charge stratagem on offer. You potentially could put them down quite close and know that you can get them out of melee against chaff units just trying to tie them up. Overall it seems to be a pretty good day for the Raven Guard. Aethon Shaan certainly looking like a really interesting datasheet. A really nice fast moving lone operative is a really good start, great value to loiter just behind the lines, screening against deep strikes, doing secondary objectives that he'll be able to get to, and no doubt counter-attacking sort of lighter enemy units really quite hard if it makes sense. Depending on the opponent, the free rapid ingress looks like a really solid option for deploying. You basically get guaranteed first charge against the enemy there, and you could even potentially use it defensively to combo with his free heroic intervention too. His damage output seems alright for a character, capable of mauling medium-sized infantry units, and his army buffing rule might not necessarily help in literally every game, though every time it either saves you a command point reroll or gets a unit into melee that would have failed the charge before, then it will be contributing to the battle in a meaningful way. Overall certainly going to depend on his points cost. Like I said, I guess it might be around about the 100 points that Shrike is, maybe a little more. If so though, I could see him being a strong Raven Guard character. Otherwise it also seems pretty great news for the Shadowmark Talon. The Vanguard Spearhead detachment was already a pretty playable one, and it feels like most of the changes have been quite big wins here. Having Hunter's Instincts from the Stormlance is a big deal. I strongly expect that that might be used to get units into the fight nice and early. Fallback shoot and charge is really handy, particularly for a detachment that incentivizes ranged infantry. Aethon Shaan giving you free return to reserves seems like he'd be borderline auto-include as a result, and the reactive move is probably a slight upgrade rather than a downgrade, so maybe not huge amounts of value gained there. Overall it feels to me like the only major loss is the sticky objective that gets sabotaged, but you can at least do that with intercessors on a backfield point. In any case, looks like pretty fun stuff on both parts. Hopefully it does enough to raise the Raven Guard's prospects a bit. It'd be nice to have them a bit more stand out amongst the Space Marine chapters and their power. In any case, let me know what you think of the new Raven Guard rules though. Let me know down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll hope to follow up with an equivalent one for the Imperial Fist shortly. If you're looking to pick up any of the Raven Guard things at the weekend or the other releases, check out the discount retailers linked down in the video description. A big thank you to anyone using those. I'll leave that there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more 40k videos, and if you'd like to support the channel a bit more directly, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. Channel patrons get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.